In 1855. A man of unassuming appearance, with the build of a laborer, and the steady gaze of someone who had seen both beauty and hardship, stepped quietly into literary history. Walt Whitman, the son of a working-class family in Brooklyn, brought forth a book that would dislocate the spine of conventional poetry. Leaves of Grass was small in its first edition, only 12 poems, printed at his own expense. But it was anything but timid. On the cover stood Whitman himself, arms crossed, hat tilted, defying the formal portraits of poets in collars and waistcoats. And within those pages lay a voice that refused the tidy cages of meter and rhyme, instead carrying the wild cadences of speech, street, and the sea. Whitman's life before Leaves of Grass had been a patchwork of trades and travels. He had set type in print shops, worked as a schoolteacher, written for newspapers. He had walked the docks, where the smell of salt water mingled with fish and sweat, and lingered in fields where farmers bent in the sun. He absorbed the rhythm of American lives, busy, uneven, often chaotic, and wove those rhythms into his lines. This was not a poet speaking from the velvet chair of academic halls. This was a poet speaking from the sand between his toes, from the timber beams of shipyards, from the rough timbre of a carpenter's hammer on wood. The historical earth beneath him was unstable. America was on the brink of a great fracture, the Civil War looming like a thunderhead. Yet the country was also young, expanding, restless, and self-inventing. In this atmosphere, Whitman envisioned a poetry that could mirror both the diversity and the unity of the American spirit. Leaves of Grass was no mere literary experiment. It was a democratic manifesto in verse, an open invitation for every kind of voice to speak and be heard. He structured his work less as a sequence and more as a living organism, breathing and growing. Over the course of his life, Whitman reissued Leaves of Grass 9 times, adding hundreds of poems. These were not simply additions. Each new edition was an act of self-reinvention. He refined, rearranged, sometimes replaced whole passages, as if the book and its author were evolving together. This restless expansion mirrored his belief that identity itself is never fixed, that both the poet and the people he writes for are always becoming. Within those pages, recurring themes rise and fall like waves. One is the celebration of the self, not as an ego locked away, but as a spark of the larger world. In Song of Myself, he proclaims, "I am large. I contain multitudes." An audacious, expansive recognition that a single person can hold contradictions, can be gentle and fierce, intimate and universal at once. Another is the sanctity of the body, expressed without shame or prudishness. In I Sing the Body Electric, every curve, muscle, and line of the human form becomes a kind of scripture. Nature, for Whitman, was not a passive backdrop. It was a partner, a reflection of humanity's own processes. Rivers, grass, leaves, the tide. These are not metaphors alone, but living presences. The title itself, Leaves of Grass, plays in this double space. Each blade of grass, a part of the earth's body. Each page of poetry, a fragment of the human record. He also confronted mortality directly. Death, in Whitman's vision, is not annihilation, but transformation. A blending back into the soil, the air, the endless flow of life. His elegy When Lilacs Last in the Dooryard Bloomed, written after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, holds grief and beauty in the same breath, offering not only mourning, but also a vision of renewal. Yet Whitman's grandeur did not blind him to imperfection. His America was the ideal he hoped for, not always the one he inhabited. he sometimes placed himself at the center of the stage. His I filling the frame so fully that the we receded. His attempt to be a national poet occasionally glossed over the deep fractures and injustices around him. Still, even these flaws are part of the organic whole. Evidence of a man wrestling, in verse, with the contradictions of his time. The initial reception of Leaves of Grass was mixed to the point of scandalous. One critic praised it as bold and original. Another called it disgraceful, even obscene, for its candid treatment of the body and sensual life. The fact that Whitman himself anonymously wrote some of the positive reviews tells us both about the uphill battle he faced and his determination to define his own work for the public. Over decades, however, the tide turned. What was once seen as indecent grew into a cornerstone of American literature. Whitman's influence is difficult to overstate. He expanded the American poetic vocabulary, allowing for free verse as a legitimate form. He opened a space for voices that had been excluded from literary speech, influencing generations, from Langston Hughes to Allen Ginsberg to contemporary spoken word artists. His insistence that poetry could be as vast and messy as the life it springs from still challenges writers today. Modern readers approach Leaves of Grass in a different world. Yet much of his urgency remains. His embrace of human diversity speaks into our ongoing struggles over identity, belonging, and equality. His respect for the entire physical being, mind, body, and spirit counters cultures that fragment them. And his call to see the self as deeply tied to others stands in opposition to the isolating tendencies of the digital age. Imagine now a contemporary version of Whitman walking the streets with earbuds in, hearing the layered city, multiple languages in the air, the rush of traffic, the laughter and tension of everyday life. Leaves of Grass invites us to treat all of it as part of the poem we inhabit. It tells us, with stubborn optimism, that the human story is not complete without every single one of us. By the time you close Leaves of Grass, whether you've read it in its first spare edition or its final sprawling one, something lingers. It is the echo of a voice speaking directly, without ornament, without artifice, into the ear of the reader, one human to another. It is the sense that, through his words, you've been offered a mirror, and in it, you've seen not just yourself, but the vast continuum of life to which you belong. This is why Leaves of Grass never truly ends. Its lines are alive, open to reshaping by each new reader, each new age. The grass never stops growing. The leaves never stop unfolding to the light. Whitman's whisper, at the end, is not a goodbye, but an invitation to live fully, to notice deeply, and to praise life endlessly.